Good morning, everyone. I'm Lucy with the ARC of Northern Virginia, and I am very excited to be here with you all and special education advocate Liz Capone today. Liz has known us for years and has just done a tremendous job of trying to make sure she's available and her services are available for people navigating the very complex and exhausting world of special education, where the stakes are so high, and I feel like families are at such a disadvantage. So, Liz, thank you so much for joining us today. We are really looking forward to learning more about strength-based IEPs and making sure our kiddos can be successful. So please feel free to take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank you for taking time on this Thursday that feels like Friday morning. It's already, yeah, right. We've already had 5 full weekdays today, so it's like fake Friday. But good morning, everybody. And I'm about to share my slides. I may look down. You may see me looking down because I also have my slides on my phone, and just as I'm advancing. But it's really interesting because I feel like this topic, it's almost counterintuitive because obviously when we are preparing an IEP or we're in an IEP meeting, we are focusing on need areas. You know, the student qualifies for special education because there are need areas. So people think, why would you want to have a strength-based IEP? Wouldn't that take the focus off where my child needs to, improve? I don't want to inflate something so the teacher doesn't give them services in that area. If I make them sound, that they're doing so well with a certain skill. Actually, I have found, and I don't think I was really aware of this perspective when I started teaching in the mid 90s. And that is my background for everybody. Just so you know, I have taught all grade levels. I've taught in 6 systems, including Fairfax. And so when I was first starting as a teacher, I'm going to gather information, need area, need area, need area. So as I start the slides, I want you to think about what is amazing and unique and special about your child. And does the IEP document that you currently have now, the most recent one that's in place now, does that reflect your child's strengths? Because often we ask parents for input. It goes in the input section. What is your input? Oh, you'd like more homework. You'd like more communication. You'd like more work samples, or everything's fine. And then everybody calls it a day and they move on. Or the team may say, well, that's great that James or Eleanor, or I'm just making up names, of course, or Tiffany does that at home, but we don't see that at school. It's actually very, very important to bridge those two things together and make sure the school knows everything your child can do. So as we get started, it's always a little wonky because when I start the slides, then the Zoom it becomes smaller and I feel like I'm in another parallel universe. So I'm going to first start the slide by hitting share screen. And if somebody, maybe Lucy, could tell me if it says, oh, I'm sorry, Lucy, I have to send a request for sharing. I'm sending the request. I know there's always a little snafu. We always expect one little snafu, and then when we're over that, we're fine. Should I
You
try it
should be
again?
good to go. Yeah.
Okay. If we don't have a snafu, even a, is it really even a, see, this is not, and advanced, I give you, okay, this is not showing my, because I have the slides pulled up on my screen.
Okay. And is it not
So
showing them as an option?
no, wait. You know, there's always, let me double click. Ta-da. Can everybody see that? Lucy,
We
can you?
should be good. Yep.
Okay. So again, today is May 8th. It's in strength-based. And we're going to look at 3 things. And we're going to touch on the LRE because I feel like that is a hot button topic in many districts. Without breaching confidentiality, I typically have um, advocacy clients in more than one state, and within certain states, I have certain clients within more than one county. So I just look at certain trends, but we're definitely going to talk about the least restrictive environment. So first, what is a strength-based IEP? Why we need to include them, and the data collection. A lot of times parents go, I don't really have much data. And then when I start asking questions, well, do you have this? Oh, yeah, I do. Do you have this? Did you write this down? Did you keep this in your binder? It turns out there's a treasure trove of data all around you. You're just not aware that that's data and you haven't compiled it. Or maybe you have and it hasn't made its way into the IEP, or maybe it's partially in the IEP. So let's talk about those three things today. What is a strength-based IEP? To me, we have strength sections in different areas. We might have them in academics, we might have them in behavior, we might have them in social skills, it might be speech. And then we have obviously the need area. And if there's a need area that impacts access to the curriculum, then you would think there would be goals and services, right? And so why do we need strengths? We need strengths because it's so important for baseline data, right? If they're saying your child can take XYZ test and you believe they should take a different test based on what you've seen, they need to know your child's strengths. It's super, super important. And so it's not just your parent input section that goes into the document. Your input can go in present levels of performance also. So let's go to the next slide. I want to look at where we can get this information. And we will have time at the end for questions. I just want to make sure we all know that. And if I can't answer your question, I'm the first person to say I have no idea. And if I've misspelled strength anywhere in the document, because that was a challenge, please let me know. So where do we get the information for your child's strengths? Preferences, interest areas, background knowledge, skills, hobbies, community participation. This is not a finite list. Um, Go up to preferences. That's one of the ones that students have preferences. Children have preferences. They may like certain restaurants more than another. They may like a certain type of pet. They may like to go to one park versus the zoo or a museum. That preference, whether they're writing, a paragraph about it, which most students don't write a paragraph about why I want to go to the zoo versus, the Museum of Natural History or whatever. But the fact that if you offer them, which one do you want to go to? Okay, well, then sometimes you want to go, well, why? Or when you go there, what does your child do once they've expressed that preference and they're participating in that preference? Maybe you were at the park and there's two different groups of students. One is playing soccer, one is on, the playground equipment. Which one does your child choose and why? What do they say about it? Expressions of preference are very important because it shows they're making choices and it has a why to it. So keep track of those. Interest areas. This is so broad, and especially with the internet, right? If your child is on an app or on YouTube or anywhere and always goes to, can't talk this morning, always sort of selects a certain part of the internet. Maybe they're always looking at zoo animals. Maybe they're on Nickelodeon. Maybe they love to look at nature videos, or maybe they're really interested in looking at travel, or they love to look at different pictures of fashion, or they love a certain genre where they love anime. Whatever it is, that shows that they've made a choice for something and a choice that they don't want to do other things. So that's really, really important. Background knowledge. So many children know so many different things, but we don't stop and ask them. I remember my last year of teaching, I was virtual, and we were trying to get some students to do some writing. Some of them were just getting, eking out a few words. And then I started asking one student who was a gen ed student, but he wasn't getting any work done. So I'm like, okay, let me work with some students and get some things done. Turns out he loves soccer. He played soccer. He knew a lot about soccer, and he collected soccer jerseys. And I said, does your teacher know this? No, I don't. He's never been asked. I remember another scholar when I was teaching in Howard County years ago, and it was a tutorial, like a study skills class, and he was almost failing English. And he goes, I wanted to share some of my poetry with you in the class. And I said, poetry? Oh, is this for an assignment in English? No. I said, oh, did you let your English teacher know you write poetry? No. Are you turning in your English work? No. He got up, I think we did the following Friday and presented. When I tell you the other students were spellbound. So he was failing English. And again, I'm not breaching confidentiality. I'm not saying any names, but he was a brilliant poet. But nobody knew it. Nobody stopped and looked and asked. Skills. One summer, I was teaching extended school year in Prince George's County, And we were told the first day of ESY that there'd be a talent show, closing ceremony, celebration situation at the end of the summer. And I had taught that prior summer with the same program, amazing administrators. They brought a DJ from a local radio station to the celebration the prior summer. They had certificates, balloons. It was a big to do. And I said, okay, well, we're going to start now. We're going to start practicing. So there was a friend with Down syndrome. There were some other friends. This one friend, he was very quiet. And again, I'm not breaching confidentiality, but I found a video on YouTube. I found a current song and I said, we're going to learn the dance steps to the song. We're going to practice every other day and we're going to perform as a class. He got up and danced, and the teachers, the assistants, and I, we were just, our jaws were dropping. His dance skills were so far superior of like almost any high school student I had ever seen. But again, where are those opportunities? So if we don't provide those situations and the structure, and I don't think anybody asked the parent, is your child good at this? Is your child good at that? We didn't know how good of a dancer he was. So it was amazing to see, and he was confident. So we put him in the front. It was great. It was wonderful. Hobbies, again, back to technology. A lot of our friends and scholars may be into online puzzles. They may be wanting to watch, videos about certain kinds of pets or caring for certain kinds of pets or cooking or fashion or science, whatever it is. All of this can go into different parts of the IEP, right? Background information, it could be in, under social skills. If they have social skills that they're working on for their pragmatics, for speech, we want to know how are they interacting with people at home? How are they expressing those hobbies? How do you know that they do or don't want to go to karate? They do or don't want to go to a certain restaurant. The next one is so, so, so crucial. Community participation. What you see with your child out and about, with relatives, with friends, with neighbors, with siblings, with cousins, whomever. How are they doing? Are they independent, setting the table? A lot of students are like, I don't want to do any chores. I'm not doing any chores unless I get allowance. Or they just go and do chores without being asked. They when you go to the park, they run and find a group to play with, or they want to sit in the bench and maybe, just watch the pigeons, whatever it is. Community participation is so important. It opens up a window into what a student wants to do and is doing under a non-academic, sort of a low stakes environment. If there are students who go up to strangers at the park and say, hello, can I get on the swing? Can I play? Or they do parallel play, keep track of that. That's so important for the IEP. We want to go to the next one. We want to make sure the teachers know that students are capable. And one of the big things I see is a little bit of a dismissive message from some staff in some buildings, not all buildings, not all teams, but I've heard this more than once in more than one county, in more than one state, more than one age level. Well, we don't see that at school. And I apologize for all people in special ed if you, as a parent, have heard that message. Well, yeah, that's great that you've heard that, that you've seen that skill, that you know that your child can do, read those words and understand that, and maybe they're signing certain things, or maybe they're doing work with a math tutor or whatever it is, or they're, being really social, or they're being really independent, but we don't see that at school. So then I kind of pause and I go, what are the conditions where the child feels comfortable or is able to express their skills, is able to engage in those, activities they want and be their best selves, right? Because we don't want anything minimized for our students on IEPs. If they're doing the skill and engaging in the activity, we need to give them credit, right? Just as, can you imagine if a teacher was taking maybe a course and they mastered maybe a new skill, and then they go to their principal and they say, hey, I just got an A in this class on XYZ topic. I'd love to present to the rest of the staff. It's something that I think the staff would love. Can you imagine if a principal said, well, that's great that you do that at home on your own time, but we're only interested in what we can see and observe you doing at work? That doesn't even, that doesn't even sound right. Yet we hear that over and over. It's almost like this prove it mentality. Well, your child, you say your child can do that, but we haven't seen it here. And I always go, well, why? What opportunities, what structure, what praise, what relaxed environment do we need to set up so that the child does duplicate, engage in those skills at school, but why can't we give the child credit? What documentation and evidence and proof do we need? Do we need the tutor signing something? Do we need the parent signing a verification saying, yes, my child does XYZ? I'm a sworn affidavit. I'm being a little flippant with that. But in all seriousness, if your child is working hard at whatever skill, an academic skill, whether it's reading, writing, math, an interest area, engaging in social interaction, being independent. The teachers need to hear the message of how capable the students are. And that seems to be a theme. And I'm gonna guess and say, and just based on my return to advocacy in the past few years, I would say this can happen it typically happens at least half the time for at least half the clients I work with, where the teachers are not seeing the full performance and capability of the scholar. And it's a little bit of a narrow-mindedness without being judgmental. And I think it's a peer thing where they could literally be in the staff lounge and go, oh, well, James, again, made up name. James's mom says he can do XYZ, but when I give him the test, he's not doing it. So we're not going to put that in the IEP. We're just going to add the parent comments and attach it to the IEP and put it in the file. No, press for that being included in present levels. Because why would we want to teach a student something that they already know that could bore them, irritate them, make them angry? Just like if you're at work and you're asked to do something and you've already proven that you're capable of it. Why are we repeatedly asking our students to show something when we know they can do it? So then they're bored, they've already done it, but the teacher's like, but I need them to do it under XYZ conditions. If we already have documentation that they're doing it, maybe we should give them, I don't even want to say the benefit of the doubt. Maybe we should document that and try to challenge them and give them something a little more difficult and see where they are and acknowledge what they're able to do. Next slide is going to be, excuse me, the students need to experience the message that they have strengths. When they're pulled out for services and they're working on, well, you need to do this. Okay, go back and fix this. All of this feedback. I don't want to say it's coming off negative, but it's basically, okay, this wasn't right. You have to fix it. You didn't do this correctly. You need to work harder. You need to do 3 more problems. You can't go to recess yet. It's an anchor point. It should be reinforced. Wow. Wow. We can say, wow, Johnny. Wow, Tiffany. I didn't know that you were doing XYZ at home. And then they go, wow, I have strengths. So if I have a strength in XYZ area, that means when I'm given this reading passage or this math question or asked to do something hard in OT or PT or speech, I'm able to do it because I have strengths and I'm being acknowledged for having those strengths and I'm being looked at as the whole scholar, just like a teacher wants to be treated that way. Where, yes, a principal may say to them, well, you need to improve on your ability to manage the cafeteria, but you're doing a great job with your lesson planning. Or you do a great job with your whole group. I need you to do smart. I'm just making up some things you might hear a principal talk about in professional development. If we only acknowledge deficits, what message does that send to the child? that they still need to work harder and harder and harder. For what reward? What gain? Let's start with acknowledging, wow, I didn't know you did XYZ. I didn't know you helped your parents with cooking. I didn't know that you know all about this one website. Maybe you can share with some of the class sometime, even in a small group, what you know about this topic. I had one student years ago who was an expert on, or appeared to be an expert on, and I had never heard of the topic. It was tsunamis. I had never even heard what a tsunami was. And this student really, really studied it. And this was before like that major, very, very tragic, very fatal tsunami um, that occurred where there was a huge loss of life. This student had a huge interest in tsunami. They brought books from the library with them to class. It was really interesting. I remember another student one year really, really into cheetahs. Of all things, so random. You might go, cheetahs? What about cheetahs? So I went to the library. I got books on cheetahs. I found videos on cheetahs. That student was not on grade level in some academic subjects, and again, not breaching confidentiality, but they had knowledge in their brain and their memory that they could share verbally all about cheetahs. And it was amazing because I really didn't know much about cheetahs other than, they were fast and they, have some kind of spots. Other than that, I really didn't know anything. Um, this student, I'd say, oh, and I didn't know that. I'd say, I'll just make up his name, Freddie, wow, do you want to share anything with the group before we get started? And you want to share a fun fact? And he'd be like, cheetahs can run blah, blah, blah miles per hour. And the other kids are like, wow, where did you learn that? So again, it lets them be seen in a different light by their peers. Rather than that's a student who needs to be pulled for XYZ support. It's wow, that student knows a lot about this topic. And it's not just that they know a lot about it, they're passionate about it, they're interested in it. They can get more information about that topic. They can expand their knowledge on that topic. Another student, years prior to that, the student with the cheetah, older student, his huge, huge passion was squid. And that year, my brother, who is a retired marine biologist, there was a discovery of some squid. And my brother's coworker in Louisiana happened to be the person out on the boat or whatever. I forget her name. And there were literally a news article. So I had the news article. I handed it to the student and I said, oh, did you see this in the news about this squid? He's like, oh, yeah. I said, well, actually, I know somebody that knows the person in that picture. And you would have thought, I gave this kid $1 million. Again, making those connections with what the student is interested in, with what they're passionate about, and what they know about, and adding to their knowledge, asking them questions, opening that up. This student was very solitary, did not engage much with peers, but he lit up when I would talk to him about squid. Maybe I'd come in and say, oh, what body of water has the most squid? I might just ask him a question randomly as I'm walking around helping other students. I might go over and go, oh, and then I wanted to get more knowledge about it. So I showed him that he knew more than me, first of all, that's important. And also his knowledge was valuable, and also connecting that to transition in careers. I was like, oh, do you want to work in this field later on? He's like, I'm not sure. It's kind of a hobby. I don't know. I might get, I don't know about me being in deep water. But again, giving them the opportunity to hear about possibilities. It's so important. And again, if I wouldn't have asked him or noticed that he was reading about it, I never would have received that information, acknowledge what he knew. And then obviously when it was time for his annual review for his case manager, when I'm giving input, I want to provide background information. What does that student know, right? What does he know? What can he talk about? What is he interested in? Because if somebody walked in my room and saw him, they'd say, he didn't seem to go up and just casually engage with the other peers, right? He just didn't. So I would then say to other students, oh, so and so really knows about that if the topic came up. And we would try to do this for different students. One student in that same class was a really good artist. So we were having trouble with some of our friends and scholars getting their work turned in for some of their classes. So I said, I would really love it if you could draw me some pictures of where you think people have their missing work. Because we were thinking, where is everybody's work? It's in their backpacks. It's in their locker, it's at home, it's in their car, at their, they're at their dad's house one week and their mom's house another, all these different possibilities. This student didn't have strong organizational skills. He frequently lost papers. Sweetest, nicest kid. But when I would see him draw and doodle, he was, you know, amazing. So I said, well, I need some posters for my room to help students remember where their work is so they can get their work turned in. Let's do that. He came up with some amazing pictures. So again, we connected it to a need area at school, and then we posted those around the room. So it became a conversation piece because I said, I'll make up his name. Johnny did those to his classmates. And then they would start, oh, you know how to draw? So then, and then it snowballs, right? Because then they would say, I don't know how to draw. Could you help me? And he said, well, let me just show you a couple things. I'll draw you a cartoon character or whatever. And then I'll say, well, he's really good at drawing. What do you like to do in your free time? So then it sparks a conversation and it kind of snowballs. So we want to have an atmosphere of learning and talking about strengths so that every child knows I'm good at things, I can do things, and I can improve. It's really, really important. Um, they really have to hear that message that we're taking time to ask them what matters to them because it probably is not the same thing as what matters to an adult. So we need to take them out. What brings them joy? And if we go up and say, what brings you joy? They're going to look at you like you have, a couple different horns or whatever, and they're not going to know how to answer that. So we have to ask specific questions, and not go and interrogate them or anything. But surveys at the beginning of the year, those are really helpful. On a Saturday, if you could do anything you wanted and money was no object, what are three things you would do? And some of them will say, take my grandma to lunch, go to the zoo, play soccer, go out to eat, sleep late. It's really interesting. Asking them those questions, say, oh, that's so interesting. And then again, wow, that's so great. Your strength is your compassion. One student, one year, his behavior wasn't perfect. It was one of my last years of in-person teaching. And I asked him, I said, who do you live with? I'm just curious, what your family looks like. You seem like you really love your family. Who are your favorite people at your house? And he said, my grandmother and my chihuahua. And I thought that really said a lot because his parents live there and his siblings live there. And that told me he was compassionate, he was caring, and he also loved dogs. And I didn't know he loved dogs. So we were doing a community service trip for the whole school. We all had to pick places to go or activities to do for that school year. And so I called the local dog shelter. We were only a 10-minute walk away. It was Humane Rescue Alliance of DC. And I said, can I bring a group? And they said, we have to cap it. It was either 12 or 15. So we put all the different teachers put the word out, what they were doing. And I kind of had a random group of people who weren't all friends or even in the same grade level express interest in going to the pet shelter. And I had some feedbacks from some colleagues that was fascinating. They said you should only let the kids that are the best, have the best behavior. You should only let them go to this field trip. And I said, well, I told the kids it was first come, first served. And I want the kids who are passionate, who really want to go, who really love animals. And it was really, really interesting, excuse me, because we had a mix of students who typically may not interact in the cafeteria, in class, academic levels. And it was just me. I didn't have an assistant or not an assistant. No other adult needed to go. We had 12 to 15 students. Again, some of them did not have perfect behavior back in the building 24/7. They were interested in going. They were motivated to go. This was a novelty for them to leave the building and go to the pet shelter. When we got there, there were lots of adults from different groups. I remember there were like different consulting groups. They had their shirts, their little like t-shirts saying, community service, whatever consulting firm, and they were like raking or something. We had the guided tour with access to the animals. So that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to go see the dogs, go see the cats, go see all the animals, and we had rabbits. And then I took some pictures, which was great because some of those students who might be for let's just call it this, for lack of a better word. They might be a little sassy sometimes with some of the staff. They might not be, perfect angels. They were very well behaved. They were very engaged. They had things to talk about, and they had things to talk about with each other. So again, taking those strengths and saying that's another sort of way to see with, and it's not artificial, and it's not sort of, um, you know, we're gonna construct this group and everybody's gonna sit in the cafeteria and talk about the same thing. We're gonna learn how to have better pragmatics, and this is what we're gonna do. It was just natural, and I don't like the word organic because it's overused. It was very organic walking over there. And I was like, what do you guys want to see when we get there? What are you most excited about? Do any of you have dogs? Do any of you have cats? Do any of you want to have a dog when you're 20 or 30? Do you do you know somebody with a dog? And so they started talking. Well, I have two pit bulls and I have a chihuahua and my grandmother has this and I help the. So again, the conversation, it it evolved naturally. The students bonded. It was academic. We sat in a group. The tour guide gave us information on the shelter, how it's funded, who, what kinds of animals come there, how people adopt pets, the staff, what the staff does. So again, and uniting it with transition skills. Think about transition skills and strength, right? A lot of our transition information rather, and a lot of our IEPs, unfortunately, not all, I'm not making a blanket statement, but I would say at least three-fourths of the time, I'm seeing very, for lack of a better word, skimpy information, thin, just a skeletal, just an inkling of some, indication a student might have an interest. How about the student will visit the pet shelter? The student will identify careers in um, the career field of, caring for animals, whether that is, working at the zoo, working at a farm, working for a vet office, working at a shelter. And then the lady said, we have different jobs here. We have people taking care of the animals, people, working with interviewing people who come in to adopt the animals. We have people who make sure the shelter is taken care of, physically. So it's really, really interesting for them for transition. They're hearing, they're seeing, they're participating. And again, what sparked this was me saying, this is my group for the community service day. I'm taking a group to see the animals. I didn't know if anybody would sign up. And then we had more than the list of 15. So we had some students who unfortunately couldn't go. But the students who did go came back and shared their experience with the others. So it was amazing to see that. And some of the students were definitely not as high academically as some of the other students who were a little bit more, hung around with old. This was a ninth and 10th grade base class. I mean, that was the most common grade level. But some of them hung around with students who were a little bit older. Some of them weren't quite as, for lack of a better word, mature. But yet on this field trip, they all got along. Then we got back, we ate lunch together. And again, it was a more natural conversational setting where they're talking about a common experience. And again, it was strength based. It wasn't, here's an area they need to improve on. So I'm going to take them and show them, well, this is what you need to learn. It was, what do you want to learn? What do you already know? And they were so excited and motivated to share with each other what they already knew about animals, what they knew. Oh, you have a pit bull. Oh, what kind? Oh, where did you? Oh, how old does yours bite? It was great. It wasn't me facilitating anything. It just occurred. So again, when we provide those opportunities and let those things happen, then that's when I call it the magic happens. And we need to do that more, whether it's a pet shelter, whether it's a speaker coming in, whether it's a video we watch. There's a great, I want to call it a webcam. It's wolf.org, I believe. And I would use that website for breaks for my students while we were like maybe, in between testing or just for a daily break or whatever. And for some students, they love wolves. They want to talk about wolves. And you can see it's a live stream 24/7. It's in Ely, Minnesota. Really, really cool. And then students start saying, "Oh, I'm afraid of, I don't like dogs." And again, give them those opportunities to share what I already know about this topic, what I don't know about this topic, why I don't want to know anything about the topic. And then They may say, oh, Minnesota, my grandmother lives in Minnesota. So again, when you give them opportunities for a subject and you sort of web that out to the different things, oh, have you ever traveled out there? Um, this is a free website. What do you think we're looking for when we see the wolves? What are we interested in? Oh, I want to see if they get along. I want to see what they eat. Oh, well, what do other animals eat? Again, asking them what they know, giving them the opportunity. It's really important. Let's go to the next slide. So I just kind of talked about this. You can gain information on your child's strengths from so many different situations. Do they like to dance? Do they watch sports? Do they participate? If you drive somewhere, are they interested? Do they like collecting a map at the rest area? What do they like on YouTube? I know TikTok is not, I don't have the TikTok app. Some of the kids are on there. Which relatives do they prefer? Why? Do they sit and listen to stories? Do they participate, any skills at home? I've gone over a lot of these. I'm going to go on to the next slide. How do you collect all your information? That's up to you, how you share your data, digital, paper, whatever it is, but collect it throughout the year. So when you're ready for the annual review, you have all this information. And take a picture of those work samples, email them to yourself if they have to go back to school. If you have the notes from the teachers, the progress reports, collect all of that information. Look for common threads, look for themes, look for, wow, my child's very well behaved on field trips, in the cafeteria, in assemblies, and in class. That's a piece of data. And maybe that's not in the IEP, but it should be. However you collect the data, have some way to collect it. And again, these are just some categories for where you might sort of cull your students' strengths from. Are they engaged when they're doing homework? Maybe they're not. Maybe that's a need area. Sitting, it's tiring. It's after a long day. Are they completing it? Maybe that's an organizational need, or they're really good at that. What verbal comments do they make about what I learned at school or what they're interested in? What activities are they participating in? Um, do they want to go to school and they love to go to school? Again, for some students, unfortunately, that's a need area, but that is a strength. They're like, oh, I really want to go. And, I love school and here's why. It's not just, oh, here's my preference, but the why behind it is so important. You don't have to wait for the meeting to get this information. You don't have to wait to 2 weeks before the annual review. Ask along the way. That samples should be up. So you want samples of, okay, you don't necessarily want to bombard the teacher with a request. Oh, I want every piece of work, every single day. That's unrealistic. And I don't think you'll probably, obtain that. But a sample every, couple weeks. Oh, was there a quiz this week? Oh, I see the grade, online. Please, could you, when you have a minute, your next planning time, could you just make me a copy and send me the PDF or just send it home? Teachers, many times, or, is there a portfolio that you could bring to the next meeting? Could I have copies of the things in the portfolio? And then you can start to see trends. You don't have to wait for the teacher to do that. Your data is so important because it's historical. You know what happened last year. You know how well your child did across providers. You heard from the OT, the PT, the speech, the private person, the neighbors, the person at the park. If I'm at Target or something and somebody's really, well behaved, I might go, oh, I used to be a teacher. What very well behaved child. Comments from people who are out and about. Again, preferences and technology use is a big one. I think this is one of the most underreported areas to get strength-based data is technology use because many of our friends and scholars are independent at maneuvering on different, whatever search engine, right? They can type it in and find it. Once they get to whatever site, they're very independent and capable, right, of typing in what they want, searching for what they want, using icons. Again, all of that, even though they're not sitting there going, come here, mom, come here, dad, come here, grandma, look at me. I just went on this app and I just typed in this and now I'm on this. It's almost like a step by step by step. Let's give students credit for their technology capabilities. It's really, really crucial because not all students can do that. Not all adults can do that, right? A lot of our friends and scholars at a very young age are very capable, whether it's on a tablet, whether they know, okay, this is this icon, they know which to choose. It's not the same as assistive technology. I'm not an assistive technology expert, but when they are able to make choices and they know how to maneuver and they know how to, recharge their phone, whatever, let's give them credit for all of that. Before the meeting, and I want to watch the time because I want to allow time for questions, have what goals you want to share. And if they go, well, that's not really relevant because we only want to know where their deficits are. No, push for it to be included. Ask for it to be included. Your input is key. And I put the link at the end of the presentation to the Andrew with an E, the Andrew F case. And one of the key tenets of that case is parent involvement and parent participation. Your voice matters and your data matters. A lot of people go, well, I don't want to be that parent. This is the draft IEP. They have to go back and fix it. This is your time to say, yes, you know, um, my child is doing XYZ. My child does set their own alarm, does set the table, orders off the menu at the restaurant. We'll go up to kids that they don't know. We'll play with the neighborhood kids, help. I see a big one with our middle school and our high school kids where they help with younger siblings, or they're very kind to younger kids at the park, or they're very kind to elderly people or pets. Kindness and compassion is a plus. It needs to be included because unfortunately, out there in society today, you may have seen the news story, very upsetting situation. I believe it was in Loudon or Prince William, I'm not sure which, where some middle school students were doing some, very upsetting behaviors with a 5-year-old. As a former teacher, I must tell you, that's very, very unusual. It's very, very concerning. So we want to acknowledge when our students are mature, kind to younger, siblings, want to help younger siblings, want to help around the house, want to be organized. Maybe your child's not on grade level for reading, but they're very good at organizing their materials, going and getting their materials, understanding their directions. Find those areas and focus on those. So ask questions and you can send a short email every couple weeks. Hey, I'm just wondering, I'm looking for data on these things, or ask during the meeting and then ask for the IEP to be amended. My big one is number 3. How are they in the cafeteria? Do they walk in if they came back from a field trip and it's not the normal day and maybe some of the students aren't as familiar with them? Will they sit down and eat with strangers? Or do they need more support where they're like, hey, do you want to sit over here? Kids who are on IEPs, kids who aren't on IEPs. It's very hard to go merge with children they don't know. That's a very, very hard skill at any age. It's hard for adults. So if they are like, hey, can I sit here or not? That may be a strength or not. Who are they interacting with? Who are they helping? Do they ask in the office? Do they say good morning? Are they polite to the office staff? Very important because not all of our friends and scholars are. And how are they in their specials? Media, art, PE. They may shine like a superstar there, and then back in reading class, they may be a little more subdued. Get that information. I think I've already gone over this. Make sure it's in the present levels. I want to make sure we talk about this, and I'm not going to go too much in depth, but I want to make sure this is on your radar. When decisions are made about the least restrictive environment, as most of you know from being in many, many meetings, we start with the default of the general ed setting in the local neighborhood school. But many of our friends and scholars at this time, at this moment, for various reasons, and I've taught the continuum, I've taught in an RTC, I've taught in acute, taught inclusion, taught self-contained, et cetera, et cetera. At that moment, some of our friends and scholars, even with supports, that is not the LRE for that. And the LRE decision, it's a discussion for each child. And the second part of the regs are very key. They say, to the maximum support possible, and I'm paraphrasing this, that a child is educated with their non-disabled peers with supports put in place. So what supports can we put in place? So we really need to know, how is their behavior? How independent are they? Because we start to find when we peel the onion of the LRE discussion that what the school staff is saying for justifying keeping your child out of general ed starts falling apart a little bit when we say, well, they are independent. Well, they are well behaved. They follow directions. What skills that they're supposedly only able to get in small group, which is not with their non-disabled peers, couldn't be transferred. So really emphasize how well behaved your child is, how well they follow directions, how independent they are, how polite, because that is one of the challenges that some of our friends and scholars have that keeps them from being in gen ed full time. So keep that in mind and really ask questions on the LRE. I just referred to the Andrew F. case. This is actually a link to the Supreme Court document, which normally I would only, send you to a synopsis, but it's really, really good reading. So get yourself a mocktail, get yourself a decaf latte some weekend when the kids are asleep, chunk it and maybe read a couple pages. It's long, but it's a very important case. It's one of the most important precedent-setting cases, and I've included it here because parent input is key on this. And I will pause now for questions and I will stop sharing. And then also, that is my contact information, but I want to pause for questions and stop sharing. And I hope some little nugget in here has been helpful for either you or your neighbor or another parent. So I'm going to hit stop share and turn my mic off.
Thank you so much, Liz. We got some great questions, and I felt a lot of what you shared very deeply as a mom. And we always say, never IEP alone, right? It's wonderful if you can bring a paid advocate like Liz into the room. It makes a big difference. But if you can't, family member, friend, like someone else, so you don't feel like you're the only one at the table asking for things, I feel like makes a big difference. So we got a great one that touches my heart because this is something we're grappling with. So our current IEP was strength-based and created by their sixth grade team. And despite parents' fears and warnings that they need a lot of transition time when beginning seventh grade, the 17th grade team doesn't believe the things that had been documented, that already were agreed to in the prior IEP. So how do I proceed with a strengths-based approach with a team who's not seeing this child as capable of the things that she already demonstrated she could do?
I'm a little confused. Sorry if you could clarify. Are
Yeah,
they saying that the seventh grade team are doubting Debbie's and doubting Douglas's, that they're basically like, oh, this other IEP, which was the legal entity to determine this child's needs, and that's signed, sealed, delivered, we're not amending that. That is what it is. Oh, unfortunately, we don't see that. And so we're going to go in and rewrite things. Is that what they're trying to
that's
say?
exactly what it seems like we're saying here.
Wow. So it's really interesting because, as we all know, a new team cannot undo a prior team. They don't, they don't get to go back and go, we're gonna go rewind and we're gonna erase that and that PWN doesn't stand. That is an intact document from a legally, I'm sure it was a legally um
Binding.
whatever the required members were assembled, right? A legally assembled team made those decisions, collected data, sent out the draft, everybody got together. That is the process. So it's almost as if it's almost like they're doing like the prove it thing. Like it's the same thing I talked about. Like, well, you may see that at home, but we don't, being a little snarky here. We don't see that at school. Well, that doesn't take it away. That doesn't erase the documentation that's already present that says that child engaged in those skills. So you're almost, to me, it's a disservice because you're setting them back and go, sorry, it doesn't count. We're going to make you repeat that and prove it. And I remember, this is just an aside, a student who wasn't on an IEP, I'll say one of my nieces, um, who now works for NASA, but she was like in third grade and read a book, and then the teacher goes, "You didn't read that book this quick, da da da. I'm gonna watch you read this book." And there she is, she ended up going on to MIT, blah blah blah. I'm bragging a little bit, but the teacher was doubting, how did you read this book this fast? Because she'd either taken it home the night before and come back and said, I already read that. And again, elementary school, and here she is like, what, and they're like, oh, I'm going to sit and watch you read it, doubting her. And it's kind of like, I find that, who are we doubting, first of all? Are we doubting the kids at the top of the class? the 99th percentile kids who weren't on IEPs, are we, when we see their records and their cumulatives, are we saying, nope, this running record didn't happen? Nope. To me, that is very questionable. And I wonder what is their, what is, I don't want to word it the wrong way, but why would you doubt documentation? Are you doubting the prior staff? Are you saying that they didn't administer those tests? Are you saying that those work samples aren't valid? To me, that team needs to go to their supervisor and go, hey, I think the prior team is writing false IEPs. Go to the documents tell the story, but that document has to stand. That is the legally binding document. So if that team, that new receiving team, doubts things, they need to go to their supervisors and have the prior team checked. Otherwise, legally that stands. And if it's not implemented and enforced, I mean, not enforced, implemented and the child doesn't have the chance to engage with those goals, that's a huge problem.
All right. So here's another good one that I know a lot of families will empathize with. And I feel like we've gotten questions like this. How do you track work samples when you're asking for them to be home and what the school is saying? Oh, it's a hands-on learning program. I don't have any samples to send home. So the parents at a big disadvantage there.
Wonderful question. I couldn't have planted this question. Thank you to whoever answered. Because this is a really interesting one. It almost makes you like follow the data trail. Follow the data trail. So if they cannot provide you documentation, I don't care if it's a screenshot. And of course, a few years ago, whether it was some states were still doing the park, that's almost a thing of the past, whether whatever test is going on, certain tests, Pearson, SOL, whatever test is going on this year. I don't always keep up with all the standardized tests. Certain things teachers are legally, I don't want to say legally, they sign a little document because I've had to do it, I will not disclose test content because it's confidential. That's not the same thing as a kid is on iReady or they're taking a map bar and here's the final score. If that teacher is using data and it's from a hands-on activity, like one year I was observed and I came up with what I thought was a fun activity, and we did a marshmallow shoebox volume lesson about toxic waste dumps. And I had my objectives where the students had to calculate the area or the volume of a toxic waste dump in Maryland and build a model with marshmallows in a shoebox. And then they had to complete an exit ticket, right? So I had documentation that they learned the skill, right? I didn't just say we had a fun hands-on learning activity and everybody went home and I don't know how Jimmy versus, Tiffany, I always use those made up, versus Aiden and Connor. I don't know what they did because we just had an activity and I didn't write anything down. Where is the data? How was the data collected? How was that student assessed at that skill? If they're on iReady or whatever, what are they doing? What skill level? What grade level? What's their score? Who chose what level they'll be on? Was that self-directed? Was it AI generated? Did the teacher start the bomb? What data is or is not being collected? If they're off, they might as well just be on YouTube watching chimpanzees then, if they're just stuck on a computer. So I find that really interesting that they're like, there's no data available. Well, then, what learning occurred? If a principal walked in for an unannounced observation during that time, what information would they have collected on what learning occurred? Was there no exit ticket? So then, okay, that's Wednesday. Then what was on Thursday? Because I understand that once in a while, oh, there's indoor recess. They're on YouTube watching, how to cook omelets or something, because we just talked about omelets in one of the short stories we read. Where is the assessment? Is it an informal assessment? Are they interviewing the student? Is it a running record? Is it, I'm going to ask each student to turn in a 2 sentence summary of what they learned today? But to me, once in a while, I understand they're not documenting every single thing, but if that's every day, I'd be concerned.
And then I'll do this as our last question, kind of a follow-up to that child where we've got some discrepancies between what the sixth grade team saw and the seventh grade team. Mom is sharing that they walked her back multiple grade levels in her academic work based upon their assessment, ignoring the prior IEP, and made her go back and repeat and didn't inform the parent who learned most of the way through the school year this was going on. So advice on some next steps there.
Yeah, that's a little harder because again, I don't know all of the background information. Anytime that occurs where the data from a sending school is not matching the data on the from the receiving school, to me, are they calling a periodic review and going, hey, we don't know how this team got this data because we're not seeing it. But the fact that they did have the data and the student did achieve those skills, and then for a different reason that they're not, are they using the same instructional program? Are they having the same um, types of manipulatives? Are they using the same standards? So they're saying that the standards that were assessed last year at a certain grade level, that the student hasn't been able to duplicate them. You know, I haven't taught any students where I go, you know what? It says here that you know how to do 3-digit, division with decimals, but I don't believe that based on these assessments. So we're going to go back and do 1 plus 1. And don't get upset about that. Giving you an extreme example, but I'm saying, say I am giving 3-digit division with decimals, and the student's getting 0 out of 20. I'm gonna probably email the prior school and say, I'm really concerned. Maybe does the child have memory issues? You're saying there's some missing piece, but I'm not going to arbitrarily rewrite an IEP and implement prior goals. That sounds very, for lack of a better term, sketchy to me.
I wanted to thank the families who joined us today, and thanks to Liz for coming to talk with us and share. I know that we are all doing our very best every day to protect our kids and to make sure they get everything out of their educational experience that's possible. And it can feel like rolling a boulder up a hill. So any advice is most very welcome. Thank you all so much. If you're watching this later, please know on the Arc of Northern Virginia's YouTube channel, you can find this. You can reach out at the arcofnova.org/answers to ask questions, to get a copy of the slides, those kinds of things. So thank you all so much for being with us, and stay safe. Keep learning out there. Bye, everyone.